Welcome to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. On today's show, the Mets stay hot, notably the pitching, which has been the best in baseball. We break that down and some signs of life from the lineup. Of course, we review our scoreboard predictions, make new ones, and answer your mailbag questions. So subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch every episode on SMY's YouTube channel or wherever you get your shows. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Spring is the season for new beginnings, and it's the best time to get behind the wheel of a sophisticated new Cadillac SUV. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer today. I'm your host, Connor Rogers, joined as always by my co-host, Joe DeMeo, and the good times roll on. The Mets are off to a really strong start this season, headlined by their pitching, not just the starters, but also this incredible bullpen. And maybe in Minnesota, the first game, some signs of life from this lineup. Joe, how are you, man? It feels easy to do these shows when the Mets play this well.
It's so much better, Connor. If the Mets just rally off a losing streak, which is inevitable, they're going to have one at some point this season. Coming into that show, it's going to be one of those deep breath. All right, let's try to talk about this rationally. But when things are going well, yeah, that's so much more fun to do it this way.
It really is. Of course, subscribe to the Mets Pod. You'll never miss a show wherever you want to listen to it, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you drop us a review, of course, with a mailbag question, we take priority for those questions. So thank you very much for the reviews. You can also watch us on YouTube and get into the comment section there for more mailbag questions as well. All right, the week that was, Joe, 4-2. Pretty good rate if you can keep that up throughout the season. The Mets are the only team in baseball that have not lost back-to-back games. Yes, that is a real stat. The Mets are the last man standing in terms of being the only team left in Major League Baseball that have not lost back-to-back games. A lot of that is because the starters' ERA right now leads Major League Baseball with a 2.50. The bullpen, which is third in Major League Baseball, is 1.82. Keep in mind, Ryan Stanek, Max Kranick, and Reed Garrett all have posted 0 ERAs. Yes, 0. So, Joe, I think that's where we start things off, is that when the pitching is this good, and listen, when it warms up a little bit and there's a little bit more numbers on what guys are throwing, it's not going to be this pristine. But I think you'd rather it start this way out of the gate, Joe, than the opposite. And I think this bullpen is for real.
I think the bullpen's for real as well. When we did our season preview, that was for me. I was hot on this bullpen. Yeah. And, you mentioned Ryan Stanek and Max Kranick and Reed Garrett not allowing a run yet. And that doesn't even count Huascar Brazoban, who has 1 run on his docket. And we texted when he gave up that home run. It looked
tornado.
Like it was like a can of corn to center field that just kept going. Like you said, a tornado, a hurricane, something took this ball over the fence. So I don't exactly put that one on him. But this bullpen is what David Stearns has historically always been able to do, is build a bullpen with not just depth in numbers, but depth in quality. And if the biggest problem in your bullpen is that Edwin Diaz has been a little shaky to start the year, I think you're in a really good spot.
I think so too. I think the fact that the hardest part of a new season is often that you're just not letting guys throw 100 pitches out there. A guy can go have a really good outing and give you 4 to 5 innings where, okay, so the other half of the game, we have to go through our bullpen. And keep in mind when you get to the back end of a series that not everybody's available anymore. And it feels like the Mets are so level throughout their bullpen. There's not a guy that comes in. I understand people are low on Danny Young, and Danny Young has had his tougher moments. And, realistically, do I think Danny Young is going to finish the season in this bullpen? Probably not. But for the most part, Joe, you kind of feel the same in terms of the confidence level on all of these guys. Ironically, and I think Diaz will be fine, but in terms of when a guy comes in, Diaz is the one where the first couple pitches, you're like, man, he just might not have control right now. But you look at how Stanek is throwing, Kranick, you brought up Brazoban, Reed Garrett, who is really, really trying to solidify himself as like, okay, year 2, this is who I am. I'm a part of this thing right now. Obviously, you brought Minter here with big expectations, but it's still nice when you meet them. We know what Buteau could do as a multi-inning kind of guy. It's just a masterclass of Stearns. And I think phase 2 of how he'll be judged is when fatigue sets in and some of these guys are going to miss some time and how he replaces them. But we already know that Dednell Nunez is working on his way back as well. So there are some reinforcements and interesting arms down at the minor league level. And of course, you can make moves at the deadline. So the confidence level with this bullpen, Joe, is just marvelous. And it's really helped out the starters be the best version of themselves.
Without the bullpen, the Mets don't have the record that they do. And, talking about the starters as well, going deeper into games is something, as you said, as the weather warms up, as they get into the flow of things, you're going to see more of those 6 innings and, sometimes 7 innings, which shout out to Kodai Senga. How magnificent was his last start, getting through 7 shutout, under 80 pitches. He was locating everything. Kodai Senga is a guy that, and we'll talk about this a little bit with, Jett Williams, a little later when we go down on the farm. But when guys get kind of out of sight, out of mind, you almost forget how good they actually are. And Kodai Senga is a legitimate number 2, borderline ace caliber starting pitcher. He just happened to miss all of last year. And the question is going to be keeping him healthy throughout the year. But what he has shown me so far throughout the early going for his first couple starts of the 2025 season is, the Kodai Senga from 2023 was legit. It wasn't a fluke year. I think Senga's in for a really, really good year as long as the Mets can keep him healthy, keep him on the right trajectory, and heading towards a 6-man rotation here shortly, I think should only help Senga going forward.
The young guys, the younger lineups, Joe, just can't spit on the ghost fork. You just see it with some of these guys. And it's probably unlike anything they've ever seen, which is part of the issue here. And I'll say this about Senga as well, Joe. He is an energy guy for this team, and I think it doesn't get enough credit. There is a different energy that he plays the game with. He's out there when a guy makes a play, he's pointing, he's cheering, he's all over his teammates. And I'm not saying everybody needs to be like that. Some pitchers just need to lock in, get back to the dugout, go back out to the mound. But Senga has a almost kid-like energy to the game that I think brings out the best of everybody else playing that day. And you're kind of seeing the ripple effect of that. So this is a different team when Senga's healthy.
And one of my favorite things that Senga does is after every start, even after his last start, the first thing he does is shout out his teammates, shout out what somebody else did. Senga is not a me guy. He's a team guy. And, Brett Beatty turning that double play, considering everything he's been going through at the plate, being able to go back to his more natural position of third and flip that huge double play with Acuna. And Senga was very quick to shout that out after the game. So he's definitely a guy that is willing to give out the credit. But if he's off and he's not pitching well, he's the first one to take accountability as well, which is ultimately what you want in an athlete.
Yeah, the Mets have the right ingredients on this team. You could see it kind of ripple through. All right, let's get into a little, it's almost ships passing in the night at this point with the injury cause and effect, right? You're going to have Jose Siri out for a while, fractured tibia. Man, when that happened, Joe, knowing how he's wired, it felt bad because that kind of guy is not coming out of the game or needing that kind of assistance for a bruise. And I know the early initial results were like, I think it's fine. And then it was like, no, he fractured his tibia, which is a painful thing to go through. Siri, though, pretty good spirits with the media after the first game against the Twins, was like, I'm a quick healer. I don't think I need surgery. He's a wild man, so he's going to be down for a while. It's going to open up a roster spot. Francisco Alvarez is going to be heading to Double-A this week because of the weather. Louis Torrens has just been tremendous, taking on a bigger role this year. And once again, the ship's passing in the night here is Jeff McNeil is on his way back as well as he continues to rehab down south. Acuna's been better. We're going to get into all of this in the big picture in just a second, but I kind of want to go down everything that's happened because as Mets fans are enjoying how well this team has played, you might be missing some of this news on the injury front. Sean Manaea's MRI showed improvement. He's going to start doing some light throwing at 60 feet. So Minaya slowly getting his footing under him, and can't wait to have him back in this rotation. It's been amazing how they haven't missed a beat. But let's go to the top here, Joe, with Siri, because there is a cause and effect here where we love Tyrone Taylor. And Tyrone Taylor, when you just go on Baseball Reference, the numbers are never going to wow you at the plate. But he's a guy that gets big hits, and he's somebody that plays a high caliber center field, another team guy, good athlete, just typically not a guy that's going to play every day in center field. And the Mets might not have much of a choice here, but that was the plan going in with him and Siri to split time. What do you think the effect is, Joe? What is the depth here? Because they're not going to want to put Nimmo back in center field with the injuries that he's gone through. Marte's center field days are long, long behind him. Drew Gilbert has been working his way back at the A-ball level. They didn't just throw Drew Gilbert into Syracuse, so it feels like that could be a little bit far away. Is there a world where Acuna gets some looks in center field?
There is, and he takes reps there in like BP and he takes practice fly balls. He didn't really get into much game action during spring training, which I thought was a little interesting. And at the time, Mendoza really wanted to focus on keeping him in the dirt. But like you said, sometimes situations cause an effect, and the effect here, I think, is Luis Angel Acuna has a better shot to stick on this roster than maybe he would have had this injury not occur, because now he is not only a part of a second base platoon, if not the second baseman until Jeff McNeil comes back. But once McNeil does return, Acuna now becomes an imperative piece of depth up, out in center field, which is something he certainly has experience doing. So just unfortunate for Siri, though. I feel for him. The Mets will miss his energy and everything that he brings to the table. I know that offensively it hadn't been going really the way we had hoped, at least in the early going. But they'll miss his energy. They'll miss him on the base pass. They'll miss him in center field. But they're just going to have to make it work. That's the name of the game. Injuries happen in pro sports. Next man up, it's going to be, I think, a lot of Tyrone Taylor with some, maybe Acuna mixed in. Nimmo could get an occasional rep in center field, but I don't think that's something that the Mets are going to or should look to do with any semblance of regularity.
So moving on to the catching front, Alvarez is going to go up a level, to play with the Rumble Ponies at Double-A. It feels like the Mets are wisely going to be a little careful with Alvarez here. You and I have said as soon as this injury happened, the broken hamate bone, as a hitter, he just might not be the same guy for a little while. It's the building the strength back, getting his legs under him behind the plate. So, you know what, though, Joe? As much as we can't wait to have Alvarez back, you got to tip your cap to just what Luis Torrens has done offensively and defensively. And Hayden Sanger is throwing guys out. The defensive abilities of the Mets catching depth, you don't want to run on the Mets at this point. It feels like not that long ago we would turn on Mets games and a starting pitcher couldn't hold on a guy to save their life. A catcher had no pop time, didn't have accuracy and velocity on the throws. And now you're telling me the Mets are 3 deep at this position in terms of defensively. I know when Alvarez is ready, he's going to be the guy. But am I crazy to say there's a world Torrens has earned more playing time?
Not crazy at all. I think when Alvarez does come back, you will see not necessarily a 50-50 split, but I also don't think it's going to be Alvarez plays every day.
Why push him?
Exactly. You don't want to push him. And Torrens has earned the opportunity to be more than just, okay, it's a day after night game, so you give the catcher the day off. Torrens has earned a little bit more than that. And when you mention throwing out runners, I have stats to back up exactly what you said, Connor. In 2022, the Mets were 14th in baseball in caught stealing percentage from their catchers. In 2023, they were 30th. That would be dead last in baseball. And in 2024, they were 21st. Today, they're number 1. They have thrown out 67% of runners. So that's a credit to Luis Torrens. That's a credit to Hayden Sanger. And it's a credit to the Mets pitching staff, because holding runners is an all-encompassing game. A guy like Edwin Diaz, for example, very slow to the plate. So if guys are on base, a lot easier to steal when Diaz is on the mound. But the Mets have some quicker workers in their on their pitching staff. And then guys like Torrens, Sanger, plus arms. So when Alvarez returns, Connor, funny enough, the defense actually might take a slight step back.
Yeah. Like by
From
nature, the law of averages, yeah, it probably will. And it'll catch up to where, and Alvarez's command of the staff is remarkable at his age. To dive into Torrens too here, Joe, he is one of the more fascinating cases when you look at guys that are knocking on the door of 30. Torrens is actually going to be turning 29 in the first week of May. So a little over a year away from 30. Let's not push it that far. But you look at Torrens, this isn't a guy, I brought up the Joe Buck Linsanity run on last week's show, and a lot of people had fun with that. And it really was kind of a Linsanity run. If you dive into Torrens, Joe, he oddly just has had no opportunity at the major league level. And if you look at it, I understand, okay, so when he was 21, he was a backup catcher for the Padres, and he did get in 56 games, and he was a 0 offensively. And then you flash forward to the next time he got his shot was 4 years later for the Mariners. He played 108 games. He was fine. He had a 730 OPS. He hit 15 home runs. We know what Torrens is defensively. He's turned himself into a really good defensive catcher with the Mets. That year after, in 2022, as a 26-year-old, he only played 55 games, and he struggled. He had a down year in those 55 games, didn't play a lot. And then he didn't play for anyone, really, after that. It was kind of like, okay, you had the down year after the really good year in terms of catching production, and the Mets get him for cash from the Yankees. So do I think Torrens is an 833 OPS guy with plus defense like he is right now? No, he's not. No, guess what? You find me a catcher in baseball that routinely is. There's just not, they don't exist very often anymore. That part of the sport is a lost art. Do I think Torrens might be a 250 hitting catcher that can hover around a 700 OPS with above average defense? If you have that as your backup catcher or part-time catcher in baseball, Joe, I would think you're in the top 15 percentile in the sport. There's not a lot of teams that have number 2 catcher like that in the sport. And I think he's proving people in his age 28 and 29, about to be 29 season, that maybe with more opportunity in a place that actually knows player development, there's more on the bone for me here.
Might be the best $100,000 that Steve Cohen and the Mets have spent over the last couple of years is bringing in Luis Torrens from the Yankees.
What is that, a quarter of a painting for Steve Cohen?
A painting? You kidding? He pays insane amounts of millions for those things. But
lost change under the couch.
he finds that in his back pocket and mixed in with the lint. But what I will say is Torrens has certainly established himself to be, at bare minimum, a high-end backup, if not a low-end caliber starter. And the Mets have a guy in Francisco Alvarez, who I know it's been the injury bug has gotten him. There's been some inconsistency, but I still maintain he has all-star potential. So there's no way around saying the Mets could potentially have the best catching situation in the sport, especially when you talk about a guy like Hayden Sanger, who presumably will go back to AAA once Alvarez is healthy. That's your third guy? You're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, you are. So we just want to, we were due to give Torrens his flowers on this show. Is he going to keep this going? No, but does he deserve a lot of praise right now? He absolutely does. All right, let's look at what the actual pro club has done outside of Torrens. Alonso was the only Met on the team before last night to hit a home run with runners in scoring position, of course, before Soto did it, it's amazing the Mets have the record they are with how little they've done with runners in scoring position. Really just not a lot of power for this team right now, Joe. I will say a lot of it to me is the time of the year, because I don't see people hitting home runs against the Mets right now. That's what you have to kind of counter sometimes. We live in this world of forgetting the other team gets paid too to play. And yeah, the Mets aren't hitting a lot of home runs, but does it feel like a lot of teams are hitting home runs against the Mets in the conditions that they played in so far? It doesn't. Lindor is going to hit his home runs. As we see, Soto is going to hit his home runs. Nimmo's hitting his home runs. He's not doing literally anything else. It's very bizarre times for Brandon Nimmo, who once upon a time, all he did was work counts, get on base, hit for decent average, not a ton of power, and now he's oddly starting to become an all-or-nothing guy, but maybe it's a small sample size for that this year. We'll keep an eye on that. Do you have any concerns about the lack of power so far, Joe? And any concerns about Soto with his kind of odd stretch where he just hasn't looked like himself until that home run in Minnesota?
No concerns about Juan Soto. The one thing that I'll say, it's obviously not ideal that he has what's his OPS right now?
Probably like 740 if I had to guess.
We are at 829.
It just goes to show you the time of year. You hit one home run and draw a walk, and your OPS flips 70 points.
And it shows how good Juan Soto is.
Yeah, that too.
He has an 830 OPS, and we're like, well, what's wrong with Juan Soto?
I just put Torrens in the Hall of Fame for an 830 OPS.
And Juan Soto just give the money back. That's. But what I will say about Soto and what has impressed me about him, despite the home run power not really being there yet, the extra base hit power not really being there yet, he is essentially slump proof with his ability to work counts, get on base. So there's not going to be a time where Juan Soto is like a net zero offensively. And if this is the time of year, I think Eric Chavez said this after last night's game. If this is like the bad of Juan Soto, I can't wait to see what the good and the great look like as we move forward throughout the year. So my concern level is low with Juan Soto specifically. When it comes to power in the lineup, Mark Vientos is a guy that it felt like he was getting hot right before we recorded last week's show, and then he went off again. And now it feels like he's finding his footing again. So let's see what happens as we go throughout this week. But I need to see Mark Vientos. He's, I think, the X factor as far as hitting for power. They need that guy in the 5-6 hole, wherever he's hitting, the 5 or 6 hole. That needs to be a 25 plus home run kind of guy. If Vientos is not going to hit for that type of power, then the offense is going to end up becoming a lot more top heavy than I think the Mets want it to be. So I think I want to see a lot more from him because that's what's going to lengthen this lineup.
This is a really, really good note from Will Salmon, who we've had on the show. We love Will. He does such a good job covering the team. He said, Juan Soto is seeing a pitch in the heart of the zone with the runner on base just 16% of the time per Baseball Savant. Among players who have seen at least 100 pitches with a runner on base, Soto's percentage of pitches seen in the heart of the zone ranks as the lowest. The lowest. So, you know what, though, Joe? This is the classic when things flip. It happens in every sport. And this is why you never make concrete judgments, especially before May in baseball. And we're not even, we're literally halfway through April today. The reality is, who's feasting right now, Joe? Pete Alonso is feasting. And credit to Pete. Pete is just, we'll talk about Pete in just a second in full, because it's not just, oh, Pete Alonso has Juan Soto now, he's good again. Pete is doing things beyond that. But I think it goes to show you, Joe, the ramifications and effect of Juan Soto in a lineup. Guys don't want to throw to him. Guys don't want to be on the mound and say, I'm the guy that got beat by Juan Soto, when I need to know, that can't happen. So I think at the end of the day, they're going to have to throw to him eventually, especially as Pete is making them pay. Lindor's obviously going to make things happen. You need Vientos and Nimmo to be more consistent. But I think that stat is very, very telling right now.
It is. And I think that's the way it's going to always be with a guy like Juan Soto that is as good as he is. Teams are just, it's not like they're going to intentionally walk him all the time. This isn't, Barry Bonds back in when he's hitting 73 home runs. But they're not going to just let Juan Soto be the guy that beats them. And what Juan Soto's job is, and what he's done a good job of doing so far, if they're not going to pitch to me, I'm going to take my walks. And that's what he has to do. I don't want Juan Soto to feel like he has to live up to something and go out of his normal process and become a guy that starts chasing. And then you're making bad contact on bad pitches. Get on base. Let Pete Alonso clean up the mess like he's been doing so far throughout the season. And you have to imagine there's better days ahead for the guys like Brandon Nimmo and Mark Vientos and the DH platoon of Jesse Winker and Starling Marte. So I think get on base, do your thing, and trust the guys behind you. And that's, what Juan Soto has always been. And I don't want him to change a single thing about it.
On the other hand, and I don't think the combo is just as easy as Pete is in a lineup with Soto now, Pete's confidence show. This is rookie year Pete to me. He can hit bad pitches. He can lay off bad pitches when he needs to. He can accidentally hit a home run. He doesn't have to try to hit a home run. He is so laid back at the plate. He doesn't look like, I got to hit 50 home runs this year. I'm in a contract year. This, that. It's wild to watch the body language evolve and change for the better or revert back to what it once was for Pete Alonso. I just think he's having a blast right now, Joe.
I think this is the best Pete Alonso has ever looked, even including his rookie year. His chase percentage is down. He's in the 72nd percentile in chase percentage, which how many times did we talk on this show throughout last season? Pete just needs to lay off the breaking ball down or lay off the slider down and away, and he simply couldn't do it last year. This year, totally different game. He's letting those pitches go, and if they're close, he's fouling them off, and he's forcing these pitchers to bring the ball up, bring the ball into the zone, and he is hitting the ball harder than he ever has. He's in the 98th percentile in average exit velocity. So this is a Pete Alonso becoming much more of a complete hitter, which I think is something Mets fans have always wanted to see from him. Lay off the bad pitches, force them to throw you good pitches, and hit the crap out of them. And that's exactly what Pete Alonso's doing. And, among other things, Pete Alonso's production is probably the biggest reason why the Mets have the record that they do.
All right, Joe, as always, let's go down on the farm, look at a couple different players in the Mets minor league system. Jett Williams, an uneven start in Double A. I would not call it a bad one, just more uneven. Drew Gilbert eating alive, pitching in St. Lucie. That's no surprise as he's rehabbing. 24-year-olds, it's not a surprise to see him doing that. Let's see what Drew could do when he gets back up to Syracuse, of course. But it's only been not even 10 games, Joe, but what have you seen from Jett, a guy who felt like lost almost all last season?
I'm just happy to see a healthy Jett Williams. He playing healthy. He's out there. He hit his first home run. One of the things that is really complicated when you're evaluating these Mets prospects, specifically at the upper levels throughout the first couple weeks of the season, is there's so much stop and start because of rain delay, or rainouts or cold outs. Like Binghamton canceled the game because it was just going to be too cold to play baseball. So there's been a lot of stop and start, but all in all, I like seeing Jett out there. He's, hitting at the top of the order. Like I said, he hit his first home run. I'm not so much looking into any of the stats so far. It's just healthy, looks smooth in the field. And that's a guy that I think when we evaluate this a month and a half from now, we're going to have a better picture, I think, of seeing the Jett Williams that we did prior to his injury last year.
Joe, do you think Gilbert can get himself back in full swing to be on this team at some point this year? I would imagine he's going to need 2 productive months in Syracuse before they even consider that. But do you think that's a possibility, especially if Siri's, rehab kind of lingers?
Definitely. And what's important, Connor, is he's down in Port St. Lucie and he's healthy playing baseball games, much like we were just talking about with Jett. And we know Drew has really gone through it. It was a hamstring injury last April that lingered for months. He came back and played, and he wasn't exactly right in spring training and coming out. So it's good to just see him out there. And of course, he's hitting single A pitching. You would expect that to be the case. I believe that there is some thought to the weather that I brought up earlier as to why Gilbert is in St. Lucie and not Syracuse quite yet. I think they are waiting. Maybe it's not the full reason, but part of it, I think, is waiting for the weather to warm up a little bit. The last thing you want to do is send a guy with a history of some soft tissue things and go play baseball in 24 degrees or 30 degrees with 12-mile-an-hour winds. So just good to see Drew out there. I believe with the Siri injury, depending on the severity of the fracture, I mean, this is an injury that I can't imagine is any less than 6 to 8 weeks, and maybe even longer, depending on. Like this is going to be a lengthy absence. And between Tyrone Taylor being, realistically more of a fourth outfielder that you plug in when you need to, and a guy like Luis Angel Acuna, maybe not a full-time center fielder, but a guy who could play out there. If Gilbert can get to AAA Syracuse and hit the way he's capable of, there's no question in my mind that he can push for an opportunity. And We almost said this, last year with Harrison Bader, and again this spring with Taylor and Siri, that it almost feels like the Mets have set up their center field situation to leave opportunity for somebody like Drew Gilbert or someone like Jett Williams if you were to push to that level, before the end of the season. But I look forward to seeing Drew get back to AAA, and we'll evaluate once he gets there.
And maybe the best news for Down on the Farm this week, Ronny Mauricio is going to DH starting this week in the Florida Complex League, Joe. It'll be good for Mauricio to just see some pitching, have a bat back on his shoulder, and start to ramp back up because, man, he was a player we were excited for.
This is just extended spring training, and I know there's been some reports that he's DHing for St. Lucie or whatever. This is more extended spring training, which isn't full-blown games and all that. But Mauricio is someone that the Mets have really slow rolled. There's not been any setbacks beyond what happened last year where he needed the cleanup surgery during the summer. Mauricio's healthy. They're just taking their time and making sure he's 110%, so that way they could throw him back into the scheme of things. And he'll probably play some games with low A St. Lucie. He'll work his way up like a normal injured rehab player will. I think he'll do St. Lucie. He'll make a stop at Binghamton, and then he'll eventually make his way to Syracuse. And once he's there, depending on what's going on at second base, and we're not having the conversation yet, but what happens at third base? That could be a conversation as we move forward throughout the summer. Mauricio, I think, is squarely on the Mets' radar to play a role on the 2025 team. Now it's just a matter of him being right and earning that opportunity and seeing kind of where the chips fall at the major league level.
You're listening to the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SNY's YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Joe, let's review our scoreboard predictions from last week. Yes or no? Will Brandon Nimmo hit at least one home run? We both said yes. Nimmo hit 2 home runs. We only get 1 point, though. You don't get 2 points for him hitting 2 home runs. Over-under push was at 1 for Jose Siri stolen bases. Joe, you went under. I pushed. Under was the hit, and we are rooting for Siri's recovery. Joe, you get another point there after your really strong week 1 of the scoreboard. Over-under push was set at 2 for Juan Soto home runs. Joe, you pushed. I went under. I get the point. Soto hit 1 home run right at the buzzer. Over-under push was at 6 for Francisco Lindor hits. Joe, you pushed. I went under. He had 5. He just needed 1 more hit. Joe, the under cashes a point to me. Over-under push was at 2 for Mets starters going at least 6 innings. Joe, you went under. I pushed. Senga and Peterson went 6 innings. I got a point. Over-under push was at 4 for Mets wins. We both pushed. They won 4 games. We both got a point. A much-needed week for me, Joe. I take home 5 points. You take home 3. You're still leading the season series 10-8. But, man, I had to make this thing a game. It couldn't be over before May.
It was getting late early for you, and I decided out of the kindness of my heart and for the good of this show, I just took it easy on you for a week, and now I'm coming back with a vengeance because I don't like losing.
It was a terrible way for me to live, just begging for guys to make it at least 6 innings throughout the game. And thank God Senga and Peterson got me there. But I'm not going to lie, there was some frustrations in the group chat for me at some points when it wasn't happening. All right, we got 7 games this week. 2 against the Twins, 4 against the Cardinals, 1 against the Phillies. Yes or no, and I win the week. I get to kick things off. Will Mets starters continue to lead the league in ERA after this week? I'm going to say yes, Joe. Am I supposed to be fearful of the Cardinals? Will these words come back to haunt me? 2 against the Twins. You can kind of see the struggles their lineup is going through right now. Some health-related, some just slow starts for guys. 1 against the Phillies doesn't make you feel good. We know the Phillies could hit, especially Kyle Schwarber, what he could do. But I'm going to stay confident in this starting rotation right now.
I always talk how confident I am in the rotation, so I'm going to look like a liar when I say I'll just say no. And it's not like they're leading by this extreme margin that's like they could just have just one off start and that could just drop them out of the first spot. So I'll say they will not lead the league, but that doesn't mean that the rotation's about to get shelled this week.
Over under push is at 2 for Luis Angel Acuna stolen bases, Joe.
I will go with a push. I think Acuna is going to find himself into more playing time consistently. And if he just gets on base, Acuna has shown the ability to just go on any pitch. And he's been a successful stolen base threat dating back to when he started in professional baseball, essentially. So yeah, I don't see why he can't be a 2 stolen base guy this week.
I'm with you on this one. He gets a lot of pinch running opportunities when they need
Yeah.
somebody to swipe a bag, and he is finding his way into some hits here. So it's when Acuna is just getting on, and he's going to have these opportunities. And the fact is, like you said, Joe, he has to play more now. It's as simple as that. So I like the push as well. Over under pushes at 2 for Pete Alonso home runs. I'm going to push on this one, Joe, and go right at 2. Pete's swinging a good bat. I like what he can maybe do against the Cardinals pitching. Still got 2 against the Twins, 1 against the Phillies. So, 7 games. You tell me Pete Alonso hit 2 home runs. Let's get it done.
I like the push as well at 2. He hit like the furthest home run I think he's ever hit here in Minnesota a few years back. He almost hit it out of the stadium. So I think there's 1 in him before the Minnesota series ends. And then I just need 1 between 4 games against the Cardinals and 1 against the Phillies. Yeah, I'll push with 2.
All right, Juan Soto walks, Joe. Over under push is at 6.
I mean, if we are to believe what everyone's saying, no one will pitch to Juan Soto ever. So I have no reason to not do at least a push. I'll go over. I'll say over on walks for Juan Soto. I think that's maybe a little aggressive, but I'll go over.
He's walked 14 times in 16 games. He's averaging nearly a walk a game. So by that metric, obviously this number is set perfectly. 6 and 7. I'll go under, Joe. I'm going to say he finally starts to put the ball in play a little bit more during this stretch. We get a little bit of a wake up from Juan Soto. He'll probably still walk 4 or 5 times. I could even be wrong on the total number, but I'll go under here. Over under pushes at 1 for number of runs given up by Stanek, Reed Garrett, or Kranick this week. I have to go over. That is so low and insane expectations across 7 games. These guys haven't done it yet, but I'm going to go over, Joe. At some point, there's a runner on base and you throw 1 bad pitch and give up a home run, and this is broken.
The only miss here is it should be Stanek, Kranick, and Garrett. That just the couple names rhyming at the front. It's like the law offices of Stanek, Kranick, and Garrett.
Yeah.
But you know what? Max Kranick isn't giving up a run ever, so I'm not worried about him. You know what? I'll go under, Connor. I think they'll have another shutout week. They're not going to pitch every single day. They'll have another shutout week. I have no reason to think anything bad about the law firm of Stanek, Kranick, and Garrett.
All right, over under push. Mets wins is at 4 here, Joe. What do you like? Once again, 2 against the Twins, 4 against the Cardinals, 1 against the Phillies.
I'm an optimistic guy this week. I'm feeling pretty good, so I'm actually going to go over. I think the Mets are going to go 5-2. I think they could take care of the Twins. The Cardinals don't scare me, even though they are off to kind of a better start than I think people believed.
Yeah, they are.
And there's only 1 Phillies game in there. If there was 2 Philly games in there, I think that would have changed the calculation a little bit, but I'll actually go over.
Yeah, so the Mets, after this Twins series, will be home for the Cardinals and the Phillies. I'm going to push. I'm going to say they take 4 of 7. They won 4 last week. It feels like they're just a steady Eddie team right now with the Mets. It's a good place to be. It really, really is, and it's obviously, you want to keep that rolling. So I'll go with the push at 4. And once again, a reminder, Joe leads the season 10-8. Let's get into the mailbag questions. We got a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts from Jericho BP. Hey, guys, love the show. Listen every week. Down on the farm questions. Seems like recent draft pick Eli Serrano is tearing the cover off the ball to start the year. Can you go over his background a bit and what your expectations are for him? Thanks to the pod. Thank you for the 5-star review. Joe, can you give a little reminder to the good people about Eli Serrano, a recent Mets draft pick?
Yes, Serrano went to the same high school academy that Ryan Clifford did. They were in the same graduating year for high school. And at the time, there was actually scouts who thought Serrano was the better prospect of the two. And Clifford ended up going professional, signing with the Astros. And Serrano ended up at North Carolina State, where he just didn't really live up to what people thought he was going to be from like a power standpoint. The Mets took him in the 4th round of last year's draft out of NC State. And thus far this season, he's been, for me, the most impressive hitter in the Mets minors. He's hitting the ball hard consistently. He's hit 2 home runs to the right side of center field in Brooklyn, which if you listen to this show, nobody that's a left-handed hitter hits home runs out to right at Coney Island. He's done 2 so far already this year. And defensively, he's played both center field and left field. He's made 2 jumping catches at the wall. He's thrown 2 runners out at the plate. This is, I think, a much more well-rounded player than I thought the Mets were getting when they drafted him, at least in the early going. He's someone that I'm definitely keeping a close eye on, and he ranked just outside the top 20 in my latest top 30 from, right before the season started. I think he's on a trajectory to be, moving up that list as we move forward this summer.
Joe, what was I remember I feel like there was a reasoning and he fell. Was it just that he needed to get stronger and fill out, right?
Yeah, and he's already
green.
He's already filled out. I think when the Mets drafted him, he was like 6'4", 189 or something like that. And he's already over 200 pounds. So he's physically matured. The Mets have put him on a workout and nutrition regimen. And he's bought into everything that this player development system has thrown his way. So the Mets are very happy with the early returns on Eli Serrano.
All right, this last one from I am Sean Felming from Twitter. Despite the good start to the season, is there a worry at the lack of bats producing hits, particularly with runners in scoring position? We got a nice little note here from our producer, Sam, today. Vientos and Beatty combined for 12 strikeouts and only 2 hits with runners in scoring position so far this season. That's in 28 at-bats. So, yes and no. My yes is, Joe, that I just don't think it's going to happen for Brett Beatty. And I voiced my concerns last week for Nimmo is becoming an oddly unproductive player with runners in scoring position. It's not that Nimmo's a bad player. I can't emphasize this enough. He hits home runs. He obviously is a good left fielder. And I think that there's times where he gets back to himself and works along at bats. It's just something about his approach with runners on that he's not producing now it goes back to the second half of last season. This isn't me reacting to 2 or 3 weeks. So my antennas are a little up on Nimmo. I don't have faith in Beatty. I have a lot of confidence Vientos is going to be fine in the long haul. I'm fascinated to see what version of Jeff McNeil they get back, and same for Alvarez. So my concern meter is not overly high, Joe, but I guess it's just a little disappointing that it just doesn't look like it's going to happen for Beatty.
It's definitely disappointing that, overall the team hasn't hit the way you would like them to with runners in scoring position. And this is something that we saw at times last year when things weren't going so well for them offensively. They would get guys on base and they just couldn't get them in. They need to do a better job of situational hitting, and that's up and down the lineup. That's not just pointing fingers at Nimmo or Vientos or Beatty or whoever you want to point a finger at. I think across the board, they could stand to be better. I guess outside of Alonso, they could stand to be better with runners in scoring position. But the glass half full side of me says they're putting runners in scoring position, and it's only a matter of time before these good professional hitters start to drive them in. And that is when the natural up and down of a baseball season will occur. Once the Mets start hitting with runners in scoring position, they won't be having the best ERA in all of baseball. And it all just kind of evens itself out over 162. But to your point about Beatty, yeah, unfortunately, it's not looking like too good for him with McNeil on the way back. I struggle to see a way that he sticks on the roster. But if you want just a worry meter, like a 1 to 10, like I don't know, 3.5, something like that, maybe. Like it's on the low end. I think they're going to be okay.
And the other side of it too, Joe, is that I think Winker is going to get going, and he hasn't yet.
Yeah.
He had the 2 triples, but he's literally hitting 172. Like he has not been hitting in the air.
And he was sick. Right. So who knows was he battling being sick when he was playing, and then he sat, and then now he's like coming off it. So he's been dealing with, a bit of a stomach bug. I'm
just not worried about Jesse Winker. I think he's going to be completely fine in the role that he's in. So that we say the back of the baseball card very often on this show, and I think it's very important because a lot of these guys are going to be fine, but some of the guys that are X factors like a Beatty, and eventually we're going to see with McNeil, those are, and Nimmo is something to just watch going forward. Like that's going to matter a lot for this team, but overall, I think they're going to be okay. All right, Joe, a good start to the season for the Mets. We've had a lot of fun with this show. Like I said, it almost feels too easy when there aren't a lot of problems to discuss. You got any closing thoughts before we head into another week, a very Cardinals heavy week?
Very Cardinals heavy week, very red heavy week. The Twins have some red. The Cardinals are all red. Phillies are red. No, I'm very happy with the start for the season. Like like you said, there's always going to be things that we can nitpick, and we will evaluate everything, the positives and the negatives, no matter how the week actually goes. But it's a lot better when the Mets just go ahead and win 4 games a week, maybe 5 games a week. If they do that, I think we're in for a fun summer.
This is the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Spring is a season for new beginnings, and it's the best time to get behind the wheel of a sophisticated new Cadillac SUV. The beginning of something exceptional starts now. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer. Remember to subscribe to the show, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. You can leave us a review with a question. We will look for that for a future mailbag. Of course, you could also watch the show on SNY's YouTube channel, and you can leave questions in the comment section there as well. Become a subscriber on every platform, and you will never miss a show. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll catch you next week.